Story 1. Abu Dhabi Grand Prix 2021 was memorable for the wrong reasons. In contrast, the 2011 Canadian Grand Prix stood out positively. It was the longest race in Formula One history, lasting 4 hours from start to finish, including a 2-hour rain delay. When the race resumed, Jenson Button made an incredible comeback, moving from last place to pass Sebastian Vettel, who had dominated the season, on the final lap. Story 2. Stephen Bradbury won Australia's first ever Winter Olympic gold medal in speed skating at the Salt Lake City Games in 2002. A veteran of 4 Olympic Games, he easily won his first heat and progressed. In the quarterfinal, he finished out of contention in 3rd place but advanced to the semifinal after another racer was disqualified for obstruction. Knowing he did not have the pace of his younger rivals, he concentrated on staying upright, which paid off when his opponents crashed in the semifinal. In the final, he trailed the entire race and was 15 meters behind as the lead pack of 4 rounded the final curve. Jostling for the gold medal position, all 4 racers crashed out with less than 50 meters to go, allowing Stephen to coast through for the win. The look of both elation and disbelief on his face as his arms went up is priceless. Story 3. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I was at the Inglewood Forum watching the Los Angeles Lakers play the Chicago Bulls. Just as a timeout finished, an individual passed by the Bulls bench and grabbed a player's warm-up jacket from the back of his chair. He proceeded to sprint up the stairs and head for the lobby. The player, Jerry Sloan, shot out of his seat, hurdled his chair, and took off up the stairs like a bat out of hell. They both disappeared into the lobby. A minute later, Sloan came back down the stairs, jacket in hand. This was probably the only time in Lakers history that a Bull received a standing ovation from a Lakers crowd. Story 4. Max Verstappen won the 2016 Spanish Grand Prix on his debut for Red Bull Racing. I was working for Red Bull Racing at the time, so I got to see it all play out. It was a crazy time. Story 5. Malarchuk had his throat slashed on the ice while playing as a goalie. He was bleeding profusely, and everyone thought he had died. Story 6. Ross Chastain's video game move in NASCAR. I am not even a fan, but that was amazing. Story 7. Local 10 vs 10 Dodgeball League playoffs followed classic dodgeball movie rules, except there was no re-entry for catches, and the games were best of 5. The match was tied 2-2, with my teammate being the only one left against 4 opponents with all the balls on their side. The 4 of them lined up and counted down 3, 2, 1, throw. My teammate managed to catch all 4 balls, 1 in each hand, 1 between his legs, and the final ball with the 2 balls he had already caught. I have never seen anything like it and probably never will again. Story 8. In 1998, The Undertaker threw mankind off hell in a cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Story 9. I saw the Romain Grosjean crash live on television. It was the first time I had witnessed a serious accident while watching Formula One. After that, I stopped watching for a while because I felt too anxious. Even now, although I love watching racing, I feel much more scared than when I first started. During the live feed, we saw the crash, followed by what felt like minutes of no one reporting anything at all. It turned out he managed to get out of the car and was alive, but it was definitely very frightening. Story 10. Cecil Fielder hit his home run over the left field roof at Tiger Stadium. Only 3 people have ever achieved that in the history of the ballpark, and he was the only Tiger. The sound it made when he hit it echoed throughout the entire city. Story 11. Cricket World Cup Final 2019. England won their first ever World Cup on home soil in a super over, which is the cricket equivalent of a penalty shootout. Story 12. For National Hockey League games, it is a little-known fact that the host of a televised hockey game will have an on-call backup goalie, just in case something happens to the goalies who were supposed to play. This emergency backup goalie is one of the most cushy jobs in professional sports. You receive a small payment and a free ticket to the game for having the theoretical ability to play as a goalie while being almost guaranteed not to actually have to do so. Gather round, friends, and hear the tale of David Ayres. David had played hockey all his life, even coaching a junior hockey team and driving a Zamboni for the Toronto Marlies when he got too old to play high-level hockey himself. On February 22, 2020, David was the emergency backup goalie for a game between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes. Both Carolina goalies were injured in the first half of the game, and to avoid forfeit, Carolina asked the Maple Leafs if they could use the host backup goalie. David was signed to a one-game National Hockey League contract while hastily putting on some extra Marlies goaltender equipment. At 42 years and 194 days old, he became the oldest debut hockey player in the history of the National Hockey League. He gave up a couple of goals, but also made several decent saves. He allowed the Hurricanes to maintain their lead, and they won the game. His goalie stick is now in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and that is the true story of how the 42-year-old Zamboni driver of the Toronto Maple Leafs farm team defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs while wearing their own gear, further cementing my team as a league-wide laughingstock, and I loved every minute of it. I watched the game with my then 94-year-old grandmother, who has been a hockey fan since the 1940s. We were on our feet cheering for the entire second half of the game, and whenever she could, she would gasp, "I've never seen anything like this," while I called every person I could think of on my phone and told them to put the game on. Story 13. David Tyree's incredible helmet catch in the 2018 Super Bowl ended the Patriots' perfect season. I was passing a bar in New York City during the final moments of the game, and within seconds of going inside, he made the catch, causing the place to erupt in celebration. Story 14. It's either Janet Jackson's breast exposed live during the Super Bowl halftime show or Dennis Rodman slapping Scottie Pippen. Story 15. Manchester United versus Bayern Munich in the 1999 Champions League final. Manchester United were 1 goal down for most of the match, then scored 2 goals in quick succession in the final minutes to secure the greatest season in their history. It is worth watching. Story 16. Max Holloway pointed to the floor and knocked out Justin Gaethje with 1 second to spare right where he indicated. Story 17. Reggie Miller scored an incredible 9 points at the end of a game with the Indiana Pacers. They didn't win, but it was the most in-the-zone moment in sports I have ever witnessed. Story 18. I was the first to notice the unusual religious man running down the hangar straight at Silverstone. Story 19. The play, California versus Stanford, 1982. I didn't see it but listened to the play call on the radio. It was a wild call. I was a mile from the stadium where we had parked several cars for Stanford fans. I sarcastically praised their marching band as they returned to their cars. Story 20. I don't know if it will count as a sport, but when Owen Hart fell from the rafters in his wheelchair on television during a wrestling show. Story 21. In person, I would say Max Holloway is teaching Brian Ortega how to block punches in the middle of the fight. Story 22. The 2016 World Series Game 7 was incredible. It had a high score and a mid-game rain delay, with one team ending a championship drought of over 100 years. It was an amazing game of baseball. I haven't really watched any baseball since because that game was so exceptional. Story 23. The Eagles won the Super Bowl both times by defeating a supposedly unbeatable opponent and dominating the game. The 2017 edition is also notable for the best speech ever given in Philadelphia since the American Revolution. An underdog is a hungry dog. Story 24. I was fortunate to be at the game for Freddie Freeman's walk-off grand slam in person during Game 1 last year. The magic of that moment will stay with me for the rest of my life. Story 25. Hibernian 3 Rangers 2, having been 1-2 down in the 80th minute, won the Scottish Cup for the first time in 114 years. Story 26. In person, I haven't seen many crazy moments, but I was at the event when Stone Cold kicked Booker T in the Green Frog grocery store. Story 27. I watched live on TV the deaths of Dale Earnhardt and Dan Weldon. I had the opportunity to witness Dan Weldon winning the Indy 500 in 2011 on the last lap as a spectator. Story 28. A local high school track runner was caught on camera assaulting another girl with her baton during a relay race. The victim sustained a concussion and had to be evaluated for a possible skull fracture. Story 29. I saw a third base coach get a fractured orbit, and his eye essentially tried to pop out of his head. I was 11. Story 30. The boxing fan incident involved a man who parachuted into the ring and was subsequently beaten up. This occurred in the 1990s, if I remember correctly. Story 31. Demolition Derby in rural South Dakota as a 15-year-old Norwegian tourist. What a fantastic night. Beer-drinking spectators surround us. Cars collide until they burn or become inoperable. I love it. Story 32. I remember when Trevor Chappell bowled underarm in the one-day international between Australia and New Zealand in 1981. Story 33. My wife and I have experienced being splashed on at 3 different monster truck shows. A child with the flu, a young man, reminiscent of a dollar store Chris Farley, who had filled his 2-liter soda with vodka but did not finish it. A grandchild who begged his grandfather for every item at the concession stand. The grandfather relented and bought him a snow cone, a giant souvenir glass of soda, nachos, and cotton candy. Story 34. Manchester United came back from 0-1 down to win 2-1, securing the Champions League and the treble. Lewis Hamilton overtook Glock on the last corner of the final lap in Sao Paulo, Brazil, to win his first Formula One World Championship. Story 35. Romain Grosjean's crash in Bahrain. Germany defeating Brazil at the World Cup. Alisson scoring a header for Liverpool. Story 36. Recently, Rory McIlroy's win at the Masters completed his career Grand Slam, making him the 6th golfer to achieve this feat. It is his first major victory since 2014, marking an 11-year gap, and one of the toughest titles to win. It was incredible, and what a roller coaster experience it was. Story 37. I saw Brett Boone and Mike Cameron hit back-to-back home runs twice in the same inning. I remember when Boone hit his second home run. I looked at my wife and said, "How crazy would it be if Cameron hit one now?" Sure enough, he did. I missed those days. Story 38. George Brett Pine Tar Incident. When Billy Martin waited until after Brett hit the home run to complain about too much pine tar on the bat. Story 39. Michael Schumacher winning his first title with Ferrari was an unbelievably emotional moment. He was and still is my favorite. Romain Grosjean's fiery crash and incredible escape. Greg Moore's fatal crash live images that have stuck with me. Portugal winning the UEFA Euro 2016. I usually don't care much about soccer, but we happened to be on holiday in Madeira and randomly stumbled into a supermarket where a crowd of locals was watching the finale live on TV. We stayed until the end, and the emotions in that room and everywhere on the street after it ended were incredible, with strangers hugging each other in a moment of shared joy. Story 40. Are you watching it live in person? Perhaps Khabib jumped into the octagon to confront Dylan Dennis after choking Conor McGregor. Story 41. I watched Miami's 8 lateral kick return to beat Duke in 2015 from the 3rd row of a sports bar where half the staff and customers were Miami fans and the other half were Duke fans. The whole place went from resigned silence to complete chaos in about 30 seconds as that play unfolded. The Duke fans were already celebrating when absolute mayhem broke out. Drinks flying, people screaming, and finally Duke fans throwing menus when the referees upheld the play despite what looked like a knee down and a block in the back. I have never seen a place flip from a funeral to a riot so fast. Story 42. Any boss who fires anyone for not showing up today is unfit. Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke. 1983. Like the Voynich manuscript, nobody here will have the slightest idea what I am talking about. That's how I prefer it. You will never know. Story 43. Not sure if these are crazy, but Chelsea winning the Champions League. As a lifelong fan, I never believed it would happen. Formula One in Abu Dhabi 2021. I say no more. Story 44. The Chiefs took the game to overtime and won with 2 plays and 13 seconds left on the clock. Story 45. Miami made a comeback to win in the final minutes against San Antonio in the finals. Most of the Miami fans were already leaving. It was amusing to watch the clips of people trying to re-enter. Story 46. Fireworks boxing. In 1937, boxers wore fireproof suits with fireworks attached to their bodies while fighting in the dark. This unusual match took place in London, but surprisingly, It did not become a popular trend in boxing. Story 47. When Messi scored that last-minute goal against Real Madrid in 2017 and held up his jersey to the crowd, it gave me chills. The silence in the stadium was deafening. Story 48. I witnessed the 2011 World Series game live, the France versus Argentina World Cup final live, and Michael Phelps winning 28 medals live. Those are my top 3. An honorable mention is witnessing Tom Brady come back from a 27-3-point game to win it in the Super Bowl. Story 49. Alex Rodriguez's first at-bat as a Texas Ranger in 2001 was against the Mariners at Safeco Field. Thousands of fake red $100 bills featuring his face were scattered like in a ticker tape parade. Story 50. In the 2017 American League Championship Series Game 4, the New York Yankees were trailing 4-0 against the Houston Astros. They rallied in the 7th and 8th innings to win 6-4. It was raining beer and popcorn in the bleachers, making for a fun experience. Story 51. In person, a girl made a half-court buzzer beater in the game between Maryland and UConn about 5 years ago. Maryland was losing badly, and I was rooting for UConn. I jumped up and cheered, knowing it wasn't going to make a difference in the outcome. I was cheering for the magic of the moment. Story 52. Either Tiger's masterful comeback when he sunk that putt in the head-to-head, or Brady's comeback against the Falcons in the Super Bowl. Story 53. The Cleveland Cavaliers won the 2016 National Basketball Association Championship. Sports fans in this city had nothing to celebrate for over 50 years. I cried, my parents cried, and even my grandparents cried. It meant more to this city than anyone not from here could ever truly understand. Story 54. I watched Luis Gonzalez hit the game-winning run batted in the 2001 World Series. I will never forget that moment as long as I live. Story 55. The 1994 Caribbean Cup featured Barbados versus Grenada. Due to a new rule, the teams were attempting to score in each other's goals. Story 56. On television, Danny Sullivan's spin and win at the 1985 Indy 500 and the 13-second game between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are tied for first. In person, the disappointing 1997 flea kicker game between Nebraska and the University of Missouri contrast with the exciting 2012 U.S. Open Cup final, where Eddie Johnson's penalty kick is still in orbit. The team owner, Heineman, allowed the supporters stand to pass the cup around. Story 57. I was in the crowd just a few rows up from the track at the 2010 Indianapolis 500 when this happened in front of me. Story 58. None of these events occurred in person but were viewed live on television. The Malice in the Palace, Dale Earnhardt dying in a NASCAR race, Greg Moore dying in an IndyCar, and Alex Zanardi losing his legs in an IndyCar accident. Story 59. It was the final stretch of the Daytona 500 and Dale Jarrett was in the lead. He went in for a pit stop, which included refueling. If you have ever seen NASCAR before, they used to have large cylinders with a built-in funnel at the bottom. You would just turn it upside down into the gas tank and let it drain. Well, his pit crew, for whatever reason, forgot to remove it before he took off again. Although it was unintentional, it still counted as a penalty, and he lost his entire lap as he rounded the track back to the pit lane to have it removed. What an absolute tragedy. This was in the 1990s, so it's not like I was following the aftermath on social media. But someone definitely got fired that day. Story 60. High school basketball features a full court press that trapped a guard in the back corner with no way to get the ball down the court in time. The guard fakes an overhead pass. The overconfident defender jumps as high as possible, spreading his legs to cover passes to the side. The guard ducks down and dribbles out of coverage between the defender's legs while he is still in the air. Story 61. July 5, 1989. The Reds were playing the Phillies. Paul O'Neill bobbled the ball on a single to right field and kicked it in frustration. The ball went directly to the first baseman, preventing the run from scoring. It wasn't the most important play ever, but it was exciting to see in person. Story 62. I once flicked a cigarette at an upright Arizona iced tea bottle. Nothing but net. It's lonely here at the top. Story 63. My team's 5'1" scrum half absolutely destroyed the opposition's formidable back row with his first run of the game. The big player was running through all the teams in our league with ease and was folded like a deck chair by our little guy. It was a tackle so significant that he had to leave the pitch for the remainder of the game, prompting a collective gasp from everyone watching him get smashed. Alternatively, clearing a field of sheep so an air ambulance could land and transport a young man who shattered his leg was a pretty crazy way to finish a game. Story 64. Australia scored over 400 runs in a single 50-over innings, smashing the world record. Then South Africa took to the pitch and scored even more runs in their innings to win. Story 65. Syracuse, at home, came back from a 21-0 deficit to beat Miami 38-42. Knocking Miami out of Atlantic Coast Conference title contention. The Loud House was absolutely roaring that night. Story 66. There is a significant recent bias, but after the buildup of the USA versus Canada Four Nations game, I was, and still am, in disbelief at each of the fights. It was unexpected chaos at the perfect moment. The country rivalry in hockey, along with the tense global climate, created the perfect kindling. Story 67. Dusan Kekman, a Serbian player from the Serbian team Partizan, faced Sabona, a Croatian team, in Zagreb during the last second of the finals of a regional basketball competition. Story 68. In 1980, during a preseason game between the Jets and Bears at the Meadowlands, the Bears scored a touchdown. However, the crew did not raise the net behind the goalpost for the extra point. The kick was good, and the ball went into the stands. A lucky fan caught it and started running up the aisle, determined to keep the ball. About a dozen security personnel approached the fan to retrieve the ball. The fan skillfully zigzagged through the seats with impressive agility, but he was outnumbered. As the first security guards reached him, he threw a perfect spiral to a fan about 4 sections away. That fan made a nice catch and ran toward the exits. As security closed in on him, he sent another perfect spiral into the mezzanine. More security, more passes, laterals, and handoffs followed. The ball traveled about 4 times around the stadium, moving from field level to the upper decks, with hapless security always arriving just a moment too late. Back at field level, the public address announcer suggested, "Whoever has the ball, just keep it." At this point, the person holding the ball threw it back onto the field. Fans in the mezzanine disapproved of this action and began showering the thrower with beer. Surrounding fans, unhappy about getting soaked, started retaliating against the thrower, which led to an influx of security to handle the ensuing chaos. It was a preseason game, and nobody was watching the game during the entire third quarter. None of us remember who won. Story 69. Kansas State University football game, sometime around 2013 to 2014. They had a pregame ritual where the rival mascot would run out to the center of the football field, and then the Kansas State Wildcat mascot would run out and tackle them. On that day, the Wildcat mascot used to play football because he tackled the other mascot, the West Virginia Mountaineer, with full speed and a lowered shoulder. The tackled mascot was knocked out cold. Those of us in the stands realized it was serious when the mascot began to have a seizure right there on the 50-yard line in front of 50,000 people. It was a critical situation. Medical personnel rushed in, placed him on a stretcher, and took him to the hospital. That was the last time that ritual was ever performed, lost to history. The internet has been scrubbed of videos of the incident, leaving only articles with dead links remaining. Story 70. Okay. An actual in-game wild moment. Connie Hawkins was a hard-luck version of Julius Erving, an astonishing player who faced a lot of challenges throughout his career. In addition to his talent, he was known for his large hands. As the clock was running down at the end of the first half, one of the opposing team's players missed a jump shot with only a few seconds left. The ball took a long, high bounce off the rim into a corner of the court. Hawkins soared high for the rebound, snagging it in one hand while catching a glimpse of Lakers guard Gail Goodrich already positioned down court in the opposite corner. Without ever coming down after grabbing the rebound, he threw a behind-the-back pass the length of the court, landing squarely in Goodrich's hands. Goodrich took the shot and hit it. The buzzer sounded, marking the end of the half. The crowd lost its collective mind. Story 71. Steve Bradbury won a gold medal in speed skating at the Salt Lake City Olympics when the other three skaters fell, resulting in his unexpected victory. Story 72. Blair Walsh missed the 24-yard field goal. It was a very cold day. I had to drink the beer quickly before it froze. Story 73. Assuming you mean witnessed in person, the comeback on Catella. Story 74. I was around 7 or 8 years old when I watched a football match with kids my age. They were one player short after a kid could not participate in the second half, so another kid from a different team jumped in. This kid took off with the ball, and every player tried to stop him, including his teammates. However, he passed every player in his way and went straight for the goal, kicking it in hard and scoring a point for the opposing team. He went the wrong way. Story 75. Hester ran back the missed field goal for a touchdown. The casual walk into a full sprint while everyone looked confused was great to watch unfold. Or when the Chicago Bears came back to beat the Arizona Cardinals. Story 76. Bobby Mann and Gordon Arthur got into a fistfight during a Montrose versus Forfar game, with Bobby taking off his shirt and walking off the pitch. Story 77. I'm gonna go with the first one I remember watching. The game-winning miracle catch by the Packers wide receiver Antonio Freeman against division rivals, the Vikings, in overtime on Monday Night Football. Story 78. A few weeks ago, I went to the Austin Rodeo and saw a bull rider get slammed in the chest with a horn and then stomped while he was down. He had to have open-heart surgery, but I believe he is recovering well. Story 79. I attended most Seahawks games in the early 2010s and was present for Beastquake, the 2013 championship against the 49ers, and the 2014 championship against the Packers. All were thrilling games for different reasons. Story 80. I thought I witnessed a live murder when Masvidal kneed Askren. Story 81. It wasn't crazy, more iconic. I was in the Iranian section when they beat the United States at the France 1998 World Cup. I'm English for information, chanting Iran, Iran, Iran. Story 82. In hockey, when the puck hit Alexander Ovechkin in the face, he pulled a tooth from his mouth and continued to play. Story 83. Coco Crisp hit an infield home run when I was a kid and my family went to a Guardians game on the 4th of July. It remains one of the coolest things I have ever seen in person. The amount of fireworks they set off was something I will never forget. Story 84. I was at the game where my struggling 21-61 Raptors defeated the 72-10 Bulls, widely regarded as the greatest NBA team. Watching Michael Jordan play up close is something I will tell my grandchildren about. I will also tell them how we defeated him and his team. Story 85. I watched Rory McIlroy's final Masters shot to win the Grand Slam on TV, and I didn't even know it at the time. I am not a golf watcher and had just turned it on because it was peaceful. I didn't understand why everyone was crying. What a moment to tune in, though. Story 86. Malice at the Palace, Pacers vs. Pistons, November 19, 2004. I, a 74-year-old Pacers fan, watched it on television. There was massive violence among very large people and much smaller Pistons fans. I also saw one miracle hit John Roseborough in the head with a baseball bat. By then, I was a Mets fan, so who cared? Story 87. Several come to mind. Germany vs. Brazil 7-1. 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. 2012 Brazilian Grand Prix. I think you'll notice which sport I watch most. Story 88. I watched a drag car lose control and crash about 50 feet from me a few weeks ago. It hit the concrete barriers hard enough to explode one and shift the other. Story 89. Liverpool's miracle at Anfield in 2019. Champions League semi-final. Liverpool were down 3-0 after the first leg against Barcelona. No Salah. No Firmino. Most people had already written them off. Final score, 4-0. Story 90. When the goalie scored a goal from the other side of the field, it felt like he was playing a video game with cheat codes. Story 91. Barely 6 feet tall, Allen Iverson walked into the Staples Center, and led his team to victory against the 2001 Lakers by himself in Game 1 of the National Basketball Association Finals. I hadn't seen someone so small make such a significant impact since Frodo. Story 92. Japan vs. Belgium World Cup 2018. Greatest counterattack in history, final seconds of the game. Starting at 1:23. Story 93. Leicester City's 2015 to 2016 Premier League run and victory is the quintessential underdog story. Story 94. High school football game. The McKinney, Texas high school running back ran for 562 yards, setting a state record. By the end of the game, there were numerous reporters present because he had already rushed for 350 yards by halftime, indicating that something special was happening. Story 95. I remember seeing the Bautista bat flip live as it happened, as well as Sidney Crosby's golden goal. That entire tournament was an unforgettable experience. Story 96. The Silver Ferns turned things around after being completely useless in their quest to win the World Cup in 2019. No one saw that coming. Story 97. I attended a cricket match at Headingley many years ago. The ball was hit to an outfielder, who then attempted to throw it back at the stumps. The ball suddenly stopped in midair and fell. The crowd had no idea what had occurred. A replay on the big screen revealed the full story. In slow motion, as the ball was thrown, a pigeon appeared in the frame. I can only assume the bird was dead on impact, but the outfielder picked it up and placed it on the side of the pitch. You would expect that to be the end of the story, but then a drunken man wearing a Mexican wrestling mask ran onto the pitch and grabbed the corpse of the pigeon. He ran across the width of the pitch, holding the carcass as if it were Simba. People think cricket is a boring sport. Story 98. The most exciting sporting moment I witnessed was the 2016 National Basketball Association Finals. Game 7. LeBron's block on Andre Iguodala, Kyrie's clutch three-point shot, and the Cleveland Cavaliers coming back from a 3-1 deficit to beat the 73-9 Golden State Warriors was absolute madness. Story 99. In the World Cup final between France and Italy, with the game tied at 1-1, Zinedine Zidane, a legend, was sent off for headbutting Marco Materazzi. Story 100. Freddie Freeman's walk-off grand slam for the Dodgers secured a victory in Game 1 of the 2025 World Series. I was at the game as a Yankees fan. I have never heard a crowd get so loud. Story 101. When Valentino Rossi defeated Casey Stoner at Laguna Seca, he wore his opponent down like no other. Story 102. The Sharks' 4-goal comeback against the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 7 after the major penalty, and the overtime goal to finish it off. Story 103. Malcolm Butler's improbable last-minute interception to win Super Bowl 49 in 2015 was unforgettable. As a Patriots fan, sitting there watching the Seahawks about to score with 30 seconds left, I knew the odds of a Patriots victory were slim. While we all hope for miracles, we know they are rare. I simply couldn't believe it when it happened. Story 104. The entire incident involving Tanya Harding and her boyfriend assaulting Nancy Kerrigan is truly remarkable, culminating in Tanya's skate breaking during her Olympic routine and her pleading with the judges for a second chance. Story 105. February 1st, 2020 Edmonton Oilers versus Calgary Flames. 2 words, goalie fight. Story 106. I witnessed the most recent instance of a natural cycle single, double, triple, and home run in sequential order, in 2006 when Gary Matthews Jr. accomplished the feat. Best of all, I kept score and still have the scorecard. Story 107. Lance Armstrong's glance at Jan Ullrich. All day, Ullrich's telecom team had been pushing the pace while Armstrong became increasingly isolated from his team until he was on his own. The final climb of the day is one of the most celebrated climbs in cycling, Alpe d'Huez. Armstrong looks over his shoulder directly at Ullrich and then accelerates in a display of complete domination. Yes, he used performance-enhancing drugs, as did Ullrich and many others in the peloton. And yes, he remains highly controversial. Story 108. For me, it was the St. Louis Blues winning the 2019 Stanley Cup. I remember my dad giving up on them mid-season when they were in last place. Winning the first cup in franchise history is something I will never see again. Story 109. I was in New York City and the Yankees were playing, so I thought it was the perfect time to see Yankee Stadium. It turned out that it was the game when Alex Rodriguez hit his 500th home run into my section a few rows in front of me. It was pretty sweet. I can't remember how many years later, but I was also in New York City. I hopped on the elevator at my hotel to go to the lobby, and a few floors later, it stopped and a group of guys wearing Manchester United jerseys, shorts, and bags got on. I thought it was unusual, but when we got to the lobby, there were thousands of people outside. Turned out it was Manchester United. They were playing Real Madrid. Story 110. A guy on my high school soccer team broke his femur when he hit the goal post. I was at midfield, and it sounded like a massive branch breaking. Our goalie started to vomit when he saw what happened. Story 111. A player got into a fight during a hockey game and pointed at another player as he was heading to the penalty box. Unfortunately, the player he pointed at skated by just as he was leaving the penalty box. The first player then clotheslined him and started to beat him up, leading to him being sent back to the penalty box. After being released for a second time, he got into another fight and was ejected from the game in the first period. I also saw a referee get hit in the face with a puck. Story 112. NCAA hockey playoffs when Holy Cross defeated the University of Minnesota in overtime. It was the loudest I've ever heard the Engelstad Arena, and the University of North Dakota wasn't even playing. Story 113. The Chicago Cubs won the 2016 World Series. Dexter Fowler hit a leadoff home run off Corey Kluber, who was considered one of the best pitchers in the league at the time. The Cubs started to pull away midway through the game. They brought in their backup catcher, David Ross, who immediately mishandled a wild pitch from John Lester, allowing Cleveland to score 2 runs. Ross, almost 40 years old at the time, hit a home run in the next inning. The Cubs called on their closer, Aroldis Chapman, for the bottom of the 8th inning. He gave up 3 runs, including a crucial 2-run homer to Rajai Davis, which tied the game. The 9th inning ended in a tie, leading to extra innings in the World Series, after a rain delay added to the tension for the crowd and television audience. Ben Zobrist, a defense-oriented utility player, hit a go-ahead double for the Cubs after Cleveland chose to intentionally walk Anthony Rizzo. Rizzo scored just 2 batters later. Rajai Davis pulled 1 run back, cutting the Cubs' lead in half in the 10th inning. The Cubs sent in Michael Montgomery, who was not their top reliever, to close out the game. He succeeded on a close groundout, leading the Cubs to end a championship drought of over 100 years, and the city of Chicago erupted in celebration. Story 114. Not as memorable as the others, but I was in the stands watching when Acuna Jr. started the 40-70 club. Story 115. A random series of events found me at the Cowboys vs. Giants game, where Odell made that incredible one-handed catch. I didn't care for either team, but we were in a heavily populated section of Cowboys fans, and the banter was entertaining. When that catch happened, everyone fell silent, and we knew it would be featured in ESPN highlights for as long as Odell was being discussed. Story 116. The Cricket World Cup final that England won seemed like a thrilling game. I'm not a cricket fan, so I'm not sure what got me watching, but I remember the commentator saying that this needed to happen, although it was unlikely. Then it happened about 10 different times. The player, Ben Stokes, seemed to perform a Herculean effort and led the team to victory. It was quite remarkable. Story 117. Back when I played basketball, it was LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers winning the championship after coming back from being down 3-1 in the series. I stood there in shock while my brother was extremely happy. I eventually congratulated my brother and went about my day. I started getting into combat sports a few years ago, and for that, it would be Ilia Topuria knocking out both Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway back-to-back. Volkanovski's knockout had me crying myself to sleep. Story 118. Little league game almost 60 years ago. The first baseline was about 40 to 50 feet from the street where everyone had parked their cars. Some kid hit a foul ball heading toward the street. Everyone turned to watch it to see if it would hit a parked car. It came down toward the middle of the street and dropped into the back seat of a convertible that just happened to be passing by at that moment. The woman driving the car was oblivious, and everyone laughed as we watched the game ball drive off down the street. Story 119. Look up Bob Campaignen. If you were the fastest marathon runner in the history of the United States at that time, what would you be willing to do for $100,000 and a spot on the Olympic team? If the answer is throwing up all over yourself on live national television, you won. Pete Sampras did the same thing a few months later at the US Open. Both of them won their respective events as well. The Sampras incident was also the subject of a column by Dave Barry that you would not want to read over breakfast. Story 120. Liverpool defeated Barcelona 4-0 after losing the first game 0-3. The corner was taken quickly, and I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Story 121. I have witnessed many memorable moments, but these stand out the most. When Rodrigo scored twice after the 90th minute against Manchester City in the UEFA Champions League. When Khabib Nurmagomedov finished Conor McGregor and then engaged in a brawl with Dylan Dennis in the crowd. Story 122. Didn't witness it, but it was my mother's story. She used to play soccer in high school and is the kind of person who never gives up, especially when she's angry. One day, they were playing against a particularly nasty team, the kind no one wants to play because they play dirty. My mom had the ball and a girl from the opposing team kicked her knee, making it look like she was going for the ball, but her malicious look said it all. My mom's kneecap shifted above where it was supposed to be. The referee tried to call her off the field, but she saw red. She chased the girl down and took the ball back before passing it to a teammate, finally sitting out afterwards. The adrenaline wore off and she finally felt the pain and went to the hospital later. She still brags about it, but my grandfather says it was one of the most nauseating moments of his life. Story 123. Romain Grosjean's fiery crash in the Bahrain Grand Prix 2020 is still unbelievable how he survived that incident. Additionally, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix 2021 was notable. Story 124. Lucas scored 73 points against the Hawks, and former Bears kicker Cody Parkey hit the upright 4 times in one game, resulting in a quadruple doink. Story 125. Scott Hatteberg's walk-off home run against the Royals. Ryan Newman was spun around and then flipped upside down on top of another car at Talladega, but walked away from it. Aaron Rodgers' Hail Mary pass to Jeff Janis. Aaron Boone's walk-off home run against Tim Wakefield. Jose Bautista's walk-off hit against the Rangers. David Tyree's helmet catch. Story 126. I haven't watched much sports, but I attended a watch party last year when the Edmonton Oilers reached Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals after being down 3-0. Everyone went wild. Story 127. UConn's Jalen Adams made a half-court shot with less than a second remaining to force a 4th overtime and win the game. Story 128. Mason McTavish batted the puck out of midair on a sure goal in overtime of the gold medal game in the World Junior Hockey Championship. Team Canada scored a minute later. Alternatively, there was the Malcolm Butler interception on the goal line in the Super Bowl. Story 129. Local racing features a tight championship and a hard race. The first and second contenders are also in the top 2 positions in the race. My driver was in second place until he overtook in the final lap, crossing the finish line while losing a front wheel at that exact moment. The car went off track, and he got out to celebrate by kissing his car. Story 130. In the WWE Royal Rumble 2005, John Cena and Batista fell out of the ring at the same time. Subsequently, Vince McMahon injured both of his quadriceps. Story 131. I think the craziest moment is still the 28-3 comeback by the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons. I have always been annoyed with Tom Brady like everyone else, but at that point, I remember just watching and realizing, wow, this is special. Story 132. The response to Steve Bartman, an ordinary baseball fan who didn't do anything unusual. Poor guy. Story 133. Sad memory. It was on May 1st, 1994, at 2:17 p.m. GMT+2. I was watching the live broadcast and stayed glued to the TV long into the night, unable to look away, stunned by what I had just witnessed, much like on September 11th. Ayrton Senna was gone. Story 134. Carrie Strug in the 1996 Olympics secured the gold for the women's gymnastics team, despite a sprained ankle. It was incredible. Story 135. In person at the Red Sox vs. Yankees Game 4, Dave Roberts made a steal. I almost left early to avoid seeing the Red Sox lose again. Story 136. In 2017, the 8th seed Nashville Predators swept the 1st seed Chicago Blackhawks. Pekka Rinne made an impressive save after a poor clearance during a power play. Story 137. Fernando Tatis is playing baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals, hitting 2 grand slams in the same inning off the same pitcher. Story 138. In person, it was probably Martinsville in 2015 when Matt Kenseth drove leader Joey Logano into the Turn 1 wall. They had some tension in previous races, and Kenseth decided to get his revenge. The crowd went wild. NASCAR legend Jeff Gordon went on to win that race, which was his 93rd and final victory. Story 139. Liverpool came back from 3-0 down against AC Milan in the 2005 Champions League semi-final. I was with my dad in a pub in Liverpool city centre for this. It was absolute chaos. Story 140. In person, Nicky Hayden won the 2005 MotoGP at Laguna Seca. Nicky beating Matt Mladen at the 2002 Daytona 200 was impressive as well. On television, David Wells' perfect game was memorable. Rory's performance at the Masters a few weeks ago was noteworthy too. Story 141. Boys, a full game is not just a moment, it is an entire experience. To actually answer the original poster's question, it will be Ray Allen's clutch three-pointer to force overtime. It may not be the most insane moment, but as a Miami Heat fan, it is definitely the most exciting. Odell Beckham Jr.'s one-handed catch is also notable. Story 142. David Freese hit a wall off a home run in the 9th inning of Game 6 of the World Series to tie the game. He then hit a triple in the 11th inning to tie again, and the Cardinals went on to beat the Rangers. It was an incredible game. Story 143. Dale Earnhardt Sr. won the Daytona 500. The Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup in 2010. The Bears had a remarkable 1985 season. I also enjoyed watching my best friend Kerry Tom Watson's bag up the 18th hole at Butler National to win the Western Open. Story 144. Watching Paul Culpin beat the Cardiff defense, their fans, and a police dog to score the winning goal for Peterborough in the 90th minute. Story 145. Argentina vs. France World Cup Final. Patriots comeback against Falcons. Chiefs vs. Bills 4th quarter. Kawhi game winner against 76ers. Story 146. Newcastle United won their first trophy in 70 years. For different reasons, I remember watching the Formula One race where Ayrton Senna was killed live as a child. Story 147. January 4th, 2016. Oklahoma Sooners vs. Kansas Jayhawks. Men's college basketball. Kansas was ranked number 1 in one poll, while Oklahoma was ranked number 1 in another poll. I was fortunate to be courtside as a student broadcaster, allowing me to experience one of the best college basketball games ever. The game went into triple overtime. Buddy Hield from Oklahoma, the away team, scored nearly 50 points and received a standing ovation from the Kansas crowd after the game. It was incredible. I lost my voice for 2 days after that game. Story 148. In 2016, Tyler Naquin of the Cleveland Indians hit a walk-off home run in the ballpark to defeat the Blue Jays. It was an unforgettable moment to witness in person. Story 149. Last year, when Alabama and Auburn had a fight during the football game, it was revealed that 2 other teams engaged in an even worse conflict. Story 150. I saw a struggling Dallas Mavericks team come back from a 25-point deficit in the 4th quarter against a Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls team. Story 151. The moment I can still see and feel the most is Kobe's game winner against the Phoenix Suns. He drove right, made an elbow jumper, and the shot went in. Kobe ran with a fist pump. I was devastated in 2006. Stephen Curry's three-point flurry against France in the final at the Olympics also comes to mind. I was amazed at every shot and felt disbelief when he hit the final shot with a fadeaway over 2 defenders. Story 152. I was at the Dome when Drew Brees broke Dan Marino's single-season passing record. The record has been beaten many times since, but that day, the crowd was electric. It happened right at the end of the fourth quarter, and I swear the roof was going to come down with how everyone reacted. Felt like everyone exploded, and Mardi Gras started early. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.